And welcome back. It was not that long ago that the Jim Crow racial segregation system was alive and well in many states across this country. Jim Crow was more than a series of rigid anti-black laws. It was a caste system. You were supposed to know your place and you better not get out of line. My next guest has written a book about growing up under Jim Crow restrictions in Atlanta. The book is called Buttermilk Bottom. Author H. Victoria Hargro Atkerson joins me now. We want to welcome you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for asking me.
Now, you describe in your book this sort of outcast place in Atlanta known as Buttermilk Bottom. Close to the heart of Atlanta, yet so far.
Yes, the actual neighborhood set underneath the business district. And one of the reasons it was taken down because they didn't like looking at that black spot in the ground. This neighborhood sat about 50 feet into the ground. So any way that you entered the neighborhood, you had to go down a huge hill, which meant that all the water from the up above streets when it rained sunk into that neighborhood. And it was very, very wet all the time, muddy.
Quite sure it smelled.
Of course. And the streets were all unpaved. It was irregular, so there was no pavement, and it was all streets and alleys, what we call.
Talk about growing up under Jim Crow, because there's a generation that just doesn't get it.
Well, they better get it, because it's very important they realize where we can go. And Donald Trump is a perfect example of the people who were writing the laws that govern where we had to go, where we had to walk, where we had to sit on the trolleys, on the buses. It's a very restrictive lifestyle. They say separate but equal, but it's actually very, very, very unequal.
And one of the things that caught me in the book was that the streets, if people of color moved on the street, the name had to change.
Yes, and some of those streets still exist today in that form. So you have one street who may have 3 names, because as blacks moved in, they changed the name of the street because you could not have a black person living on the same street as a white person. And
also, if an apartment faced an area where whites were living, they had to board up or...
They boarded it up. And if you were in a building near that street, you had to enter from the back. You could not be on the same street as whites.
And even a police officer couldn't wear his uniform to work. They didn't want seeing a black man in a police
authority.
Offend a white person.
Yes, yes. And one of the people in the book who gave me this information, he worked in Buttermilk Bottom. So he had to go to the YWCA to change his clothes, put on his uniform, and then he'd go to Buttermilk Bottom to work. And at the afternoon, he had to do the same thing, go back, change his clothes, and go back, because whites did not want to see him in a uniform. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, August 6th, 1965, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed racial discrimination in voting, came a year after the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Yes.
Talk about how these 2 pieces of legislation made such a difference.
Well, for one thing, it freed blacks up to let them know they had the authority to do what they wanted to do. They didn't have to live under these depressed conditions. They were citizens of in this country under their own right. Their ancestors labored for the right, and no one gave them, like Johnson didn't give us that right. We had that right. We earned the right. And our ancestors paid the price because they did the work. They worked on the plantations. They worked in homes of white people, and they took care of their children for centuries and centuries. So no one gave us anything. We earned everything we had. One of the issues that I keep getting in this book is that certain people do not believe that black men were that strong. They could, because this is about community organization, really, this book. And it talks about this male group that got together to control their neighborhood. But I have friends say, oh, that couldn't possibly happen. Oh, yes, it could. I was born in a home that had strong black men, and they are still there. And they were worthy, they were intelligent, they had integrity. And the thing that most impressed me about our black men, we have a sense of humanity that others do not have.
Now, let's talk about this very quickly. What do you say to those who don't believe we could go back to that time?
Well, this is what I call being concerned about the tribe, tribal concerns. We became a tribe of one when the first black person got off that ship, put their black feet on this earth in America. We became one. So tribal concerns are everybody has to participate, and everybody has to make sure the tribe survive and it's doing well.
And so the tribe survives today by voting.
Voting, and also making sure that the person next to you is doing well, that our educational system is addressing our issues, our political system is addressing our issues. We have to make sure those, I don't care how a person show their strengths and their care for their tribe, but what they need to do is to do something. You can't sit back and you can't sit this election out because you don't like the candidates. One of the things that we have always done is we chose the best of whoever was presented to us. And it is the responsibility of our millenniums to do the same thing. Choose the best, the one that's going to push our agenda forward the most and the best. That's the one you choose.
All right.
And right now, we know who that is.
Thank you so much for coming. The book again is called Buttermilk Bottom.
Yes.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
And up next on Our Lives, a local young lady is working for the Peace Corps in Africa, and she has some amazing stories about her experience. You want to stay with us.